Are you going to tell me to get on with it, or do I just make my own decision?
Yeah, you can start when you're ready.
Well, hello, Robert.
Hello. Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm very well.
Good. I'm looking forward to this.
Excellent. Excellent. So, welcome everyone, and thank you very much for joining. I'm Robert Tickell, and having been a director of Business South for nearly 6 years, it's my pleasure to be the host for this latest in our seminar series, this one entitled Changing Gear, the Digital Future of Business. Before we get going, some points of housekeeping, if I may. First of all, let me just go on to the next chart, please. Thank you. Please keep your camera and audio turned off, please, just so that it helps the flow. Secondly, you'll see on the screen that there's a chat function for you to ask questions, and I'll be collating those and pulling the most interesting ones together for the Q&A session. For the best viewing experience, if you view in speaker view and side by side, that seems to be the experience of others. And then also be aware this event is being recorded, and the recording will be on the Business South YouTube channel tomorrow. So secondly, can I thank our 3 sponsors for the seminar as well: Guildford Borough Council, Surrey Heath Borough Council, and Waverley Borough Council. We much appreciate your sponsorship, and thank you so much. Now, I'm conscious that for many of you, you'll have been on Zoom calls or the equivalent for much of the day. And given it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we tried to make the event stimulating and varied with 4 excellent speakers and a Q&A session at the end that I will host. The presentations you'll hear are designed to be crisp and to the point. And to that end, here's the agenda for the session. So first of all, we're going to have Stuart. And Stuart will talk about 5G, artificial intelligence and emerging technology. Then we have Chris Stanton from Guildford Borough Council, and he'll talk about their work encouraging local innovation and connectivity. Next on the agenda is Rob Dunford from the Enterprise M3 LEP, who will talk about their recent insights, including a large program that's deploying gigabit fiber between Guildford and Basingstoke. And then finally, we have a keynote speaker from IBM. Warwick Hill is joining us, and Warwick runs the services business for IBM's many telco and media customers across Europe, and will share what our current customers are currently doing. So without further ado, let me hand over to Stuart. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I'll just share my screen. Right, I presume you can see that. So my name's Stuart Fenton. I'm a director of Stuart Fenton Consultancy Limited, which is a consultancy business which advises on 5G, artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. My background is in the telco market, so I spent a number of years with some of the telcos in the UK, and I've also been appointed the 5G and artificial intelligence specialist at the Department for International Trade. So I've got around 7 minutes today to talk to you, so I'm not going to speak too much. But one of the areas that I wanted to look at really is, firstly, when we look at kind of how business has changed, I think we need to reflect on what's happened in 2020. Obviously, with the pandemic, there's been significant changes that businesses have had to make overnight. And I think what we're starting to see now is, you know, a bit of a continuation in 2021, but hopefully with everything that's going on, we might see some kind of light in the future. But it's really important to look at things like connectivity. So 5G is obviously something that I look at a lot, but I think what we're really starting to see is connectivity is a basic requirement now. You know, if you're working from home, you need to be able to do video calls, you need to be able to attend webinars, and equally, you know, if you've got children that aren't able to go into school, you need to have access to connectivity to allow them to do remote learning. So I think we've moved from, you know, connectivity not just being something that you kind of, if you have it, great. If not, you know, then, you know, you can get by. It's actually critical now to be able to actually do your job effectively. And I think people that haven't got access to good internet or good connectivity are really going to struggle and not be able to complete their day-to-day activities. I think businesses have had to react in different ways as well. I mean, overnight, pretty much most businesses had to send workers home and, you know, keep them keep them home based, which, you know, is quite hard. You know, when you look at how organizations have to, you know, manage their employees, how they have to look at mental health of employees, but equally, how do they keep systems secure? You know, literally, you had a number of people that might not have had work laptops that come in every day and connect to a desktop or connect to a system in the office. You had to give them remote access to these systems to be able to conduct business and do things effectively. So for IT managers and IT directors, you know, overnight they had to get secure ways of people having remote access. And that's an incredibly hard thing to do and not something that is easy. So it really kind of demonstrates how agile a lot of organizations have had to be. And individuals as well. So I mean, you know, something that's been really interesting is how a lot of the things that we did in the physical world suddenly overnight had to be done digitally. Banks closed, so online banking had to become you know, prevalent with most people. I mean, the number of downloads of online banking applications have increased in the last year because people needed to be able to do their finances and weren't able to go into a bank. Food shopping, you know, with the pandemic, people were scared about going to supermarkets, so suddenly having to do their online shopping was, you know, the only way they could actually get access to food. So that's something that we've really had to look at, and I think what we're starting to see is this year-on-year growth in mobile technologies and the applications that run on these networks. And there's a really good report that I would ask people to look at called The State of Mobile 2021 by a company called App Annie. And I won't go through a lot of the figures as I'm conscious of time, but you know, when we look at, you know, how many new app downloads there were in the last year, 218 billion, which is 7% year-on-year growth. The amount of time that people are spending on mobile now, the average time per user across the report was 4.2 hours a day, which is 20% year-on-year growth from 2019. And interestingly, from a business perspective, the investment from venture capitalists that's going in to mobile technologies now, we've had 73 billion worth of venture capitalist money going to mobile technologies and applications, which is a 27% year-on-year growth, which is showing that, you know, the people are adapting in how they use applications, and, you know, kind of being forced to do these physical tasks digitally has probably pushed the mobile industry 2 to 3 years ahead quicker than they would have done. So looking ahead, you know, I wanted to take an opportunity to see where, you know, from my view, where I think the industries are going and how things are going to be impacted. And I think something that's really interesting is we're looking at how technology has been integrated into younger generations. So I look at Generation Alpha, which is children born between 2010 and 2024. You know, their expectations now, they're watching their parents work from home. They're being delivered education virtually. Their expectations when they go into the workforce are going to be significantly different than they would have if they hadn't been through the pandemic, because they're watching their parents go onto webinars, doing video calls, and that will become normality to them. You know, they're going into a generation where 4G and 5G technology isn't innovation to them, it's standard. And I think that's a really exciting thing for technologists like myself, is that you're going to get these generations coming through where, you know, they're going to be pushing the boundaries of technologies even further, and their expectations are going to be so high. And I think that's a really exciting thing, because it's going to help push innovation forward much quicker. And things like 5G, artificial intelligence, looking ahead to 2030, 6G, there's a huge amount of opportunities out there. And I think we'll start to see that more with the likes of Apple. You know, the first year they put 5G into their technologies and into their phones. So iPhone 12 had 5G technology built in. So I think we'll start to see a huge number of users kind of coming on board now with 5G. And that's something that I think will help push this on-demand generation. Something from a business perspective that I think will happen is we'll go to more hybrid working models. So I believe that many workers will become home and office based. I don't think we see the death of offices. I think that, you know, from a mental health perspective and from a team building perspective, offices will need to be there, but there'll be more social environments where you maybe go there for team meetings, and it won't be somewhere that you go and sit 9 till 5 every day. And I think the expectations of the younger generation coming into the workforce is going to be pushing that agenda even further. And obviously businesses now that won't have the high overheads of having a large office space, especially in big cities like London, I think that we'll see this hybrid working model. and new business ways and kind of ways of creating wealth opportunities. So, you know, things like YouTube and esports are creating really interesting, lucrative career opportunities for younger people who are playing competitive gaming or streaming digital games. So I've put a picture there of an actual esports arena. So esport is competitive digital gaming. It's something that's really kind of a growth industry, and it's powered by the likes of Twitch, which is an online video platform where people playing video games are shown. And I mean, I haven't really got time to go through all the stats, but you know, a highlight of it was 6.9 million monthly streams on Twitch, and the average concurrent viewers was just about 2.1 million, which is incredible for an online streaming platform. So there's a number of things that are really exciting, and something that's really exciting in the south is there's a number of innovative projects that people can get excited about. There's Fawley Waterside in the Solent area, which is going to be one of the large smart towns of the future. The Enterprise M3 gaming cluster is a really exciting cluster where we're starting to see some really cool virtual reality, augmented reality, and digital games companies develop, and that's becoming a real international hotspot. And the 5G shopping centre in Camberley and Surrey Heath is another innovative project, which I think we'll start to see some really interesting things coming out in the next year or so with that. So there's tons to get excited about in this region. And I'm sorry I haven't got much longer to speak, but if anybody wants to reach out to me, I've got my contact details here, and obviously feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A at the end. Thank you.
That's great, Stuart. Thank you ever so much. So with no further ado, let me hand over to Chris. Chris Danton is from Guildford Borough Council.
Thank you, Robert. Let's just get the screen up. Right, okay. Thank you very much for a really interesting presentation there, Stuart, and I'm not going to be treading on toes too much, I hope, but this at least will complement what you've been saying, and no doubt preempt also what we'll be hearing from Rob afterwards. This starting slide is one I've used in two policies, strategic documents set up for Guildford Borough Council, which I joined in 2016 as Rural Economy Officer. And as you can see now, I've got a wider role that's economy and innovation in general. But for me, from a council perspective, that's our town and everything that people want to do now and will certainly want to do in the future. So as a starting point, it's lots of AI and connectivity, which in many ways, of course, we don't have at the moment, certainly not in rural areas. My task when I joined in 2016 was to set up the Rural Economic Strategy. And if you like, this has created for me the seeds of what I call digital commuting. We undertook a business survey of needs, and it was set up focused on the Riverway catchment in line with the Department for the Environment guidelines. So we produced this in partnership with Waverley upstream on the Riverway and Woking downstream. 5 strategic priorities, and I'm only going to mention the first, the one that's highlighted there, infrastructure. For Enterprise was the starting point, but actually infrastructure, of course, can be many things, but for me, the main focus now is the digital as opposed to the transport, and we can see for the why from the events of the past year. Rural connectivity was always a problem. This shot is not in Guildford Borough, it's not far away, but it shows the problems where you have what was a former industrial site built on, and as Stuart said, people will have expectations. That particular site, a former TB hospital, is about 2 miles from the nearest exchange, and again, the words and phrases I've highlighted there from the developer's sales prospectus are not words that I would want to read if I was going to be buying a high-end property in that development, and that was phase 3 that they were talking about. So people will have expectations, and with digital commuting, they need that gigabit connectivity. What I was able to do, thanks to a delay actually in getting our local plan approved, was to put in quite a bit of what we would have as expectations as a council on developers when it comes to building new properties and connecting. Key phrases here: fibre to the premise, FTTP. We recognise it's not always practicable, but that's what we want, and it needs to be ideally symmetric, same upload speed as download. And obviously we will work with developers and other partners to make that connectivity as good as it can possibly be. We invested as a council, we are shareholders in Broadband for the Surrey Hills, a community-led organisation which is putting gigabit fibre, symmetric full fibre, into the rural parts of the borough. And you can see there different pictures as they come down off the North Downs using mole ploughs and diggers. But it's a very quick and relatively cheap method. They still have to cross roads, but 20 kilometres have so far been laid by Broadband for Surrey Hills, affectionately known, as you can see, perhaps for obvious reasons, as BASH. And so BASH have been really good. And at the moment, they've got as far as land which Guildford Borough Council owns at Tyting Farm, just southeast of Guildford. And what you can see there is our land, which is actually a SANG. It's a suitable area of natural green space. And we have a way-leave agreement, as with all the landowners. Actually, we're providing that as a council free of charge, and also waiving the legal and admin costs involved, which are not, they're pretty big actually, but that was the deal we did. And as an investor, the council is very pleased to set this as an example for others to follow. The rural strategy and all the focus on broadband led to the innovation strategy, making Guildford smarter. 3 clear goals there, but it was essentially, obviously, to improve connectivity. Moving now from the countryside into town, the innovation strategy anticipated the change that was coming even before COVID made it a lot worse. And so that was an extract from our innovation strategy, looking at the different retail models which were already becoming apparent. And in fact, we did also mention an Amazon locker. I'm not as technical as Stuart, but I didn't know what an Amazon locker was at the time. And this is actually on my local road in one of the suburbs of Guildford. So it's moving fast, and people like me, I have to say, trying to catch up, but I'm winning so far. Ocado and Arcadia, I featured this because there was a really interesting quote by Stuart Rose, who's the chairman of Ocado. Stuart's the one with the matching tie and van. And he was talking in November about Sir Philip Green, when, of course, the Arcadia collapse was happening. It was also having a knock-on effect with Debenhams. On the right of the picture, you can see there the Friary Centre in Guildford with Topman, Topshop, front facing not the high street, but it's our second main street in Guildford. And it was interesting, that quote that Philip Green had not moved from analog world to a digital one fast enough. And when I then only last week's came across this news item on BBC, I was really intrigued, because why would a business, especially one like Primark, refuse to go online? I've got some thoughts about why that might be, actually, but it's interesting, the bit I've highlighted, that a polite turn down to the comment from the consumer, but will there be others like Primark who will take that view as well? In other words, retail needs to have the traditional as well as the online. And actually, coming back to Debenhams, this is Debenhams Guildford, which last month was sold for £20 million. And as a council, of course, we don't own it, but we do need to protect the interests of all those affected by it, people who've lost jobs or whatever. It's also to have a mixed use, which is what's being proposed by the new owners. And not far away from there, if you know Guildford, it's the building that's over the road called Friary Court. There's a gaming studio there already, but there are other gaming companies in Guildford really itching to get into the town centre for their new studio spaces. And that's partly because Guildford attracts, because the University of Surrey, because the Surrey Research Park is there. And just this slide shows how we worked with them, the university especially, to put on what would normally be a physical award ceremony, but we did it virtually thanks to the student enterprise team at the university. So really grateful, but this is a critical partnership for us, certainly in Guildford. And while we're all perhaps digital commuters now, as Stuart was hinting, there are occasions when, as we know, as a council especially, people have lost jobs or are under threat of redundancy. We don't know if the worst is yet to come. Likelihood it could be, certainly for some sectors. But we launched the Online Job Club in October, and that's had a tremendous success so far. And we're building on that with other partners to provide the business support, matching people to jobs, hopefully. But it's something which we're taking forward as another outcome of what digital means to a council. Plug here, the bits in yellow, we're collaborating with our co-sponsors today, actually, Surrey Heath. Glad to work with them. And we are jointly promoting this pop-up business school, which is running for 10 days from the 22nd of February through to the 5th of March. Bit like the Job Club, online, terrific camaraderie and support. And that's something which we're looking forward to hosting. But that's live for bookings now if anybody wants to do that. Briefly, in the digital high street, we have ways of monitoring parking, getting that interactivity with drivers so they can find a space easily and quickly. Footfall monitors, sensors showing who's where, when, and doing what. And this is all data which can be used to help improve the business in the town. We have a business improvement district, Experience Guildford. The White Rabbit there, if you don't know the Lewis Carroll connection with Guildford, that's why he's there, but he's looking at either the parking app or the Guildford app to see what's on. And I've featured this slide because of the social media links you can see on the right there. It's another way that we as a council are also doing business like others around us in the town. And coming back actually to Surrey Heath, somebody, I think it was Stuart just now, mentioned the 5G centre in Camberley. This slide really shows the need for both the traditional and the online. And so we must, as a council, change the urban landscape, but in a way that is right for everybody concerned, people, consumers, businesses, and so on. We want to pull people into the town. And that means more green space, different uses of traditional premises. So the 2020s vision, if you like, coming back to Lord Stuart Rose, is if you make the high streets attractive, the people will come. Meanwhile, we have a pandemic to fight, and that's how the council at the moment is doing other things, thanks to digital. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Chris. Moving on, Rob Dunford is next on the agenda. He's from the Enterprise M3 Lab. Rob, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Robert, and I'll just share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. I'm sure somebody will interject if they can't. So thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. I've got about 8 or 9 slides here that I'm going to fly through, conscious of time, and very welcome to take questions in the Q&A session. Enterprise M3 in December 2020 published its Revive and Renew recovery strategy in response to the pandemic. And it came up with 3 very high level recommendations for actions and interventions into the regional economy to help us recover. I've listed them there, but the one I'm going to focus on with the kind of crude highlighting is the digitisation and ultra-fast digital infrastructure for business resilience, innovation and growth, which is a bit of a mouthful, but I think it's the one that's very relevant to today's discussion. Drilling down into that, then there's within those interventions, there are a few key actions that we are looking to implement in order to take those priorities forward. The first one, which I'm going to again drill into more detail in a moment, is that the LEP and its partners should continue to prioritise the implementation of the Gigabit EM3 Town and Rural Fibre Spine project, which I will just come on to in a second, but also that the team and our partners should continue to support the digitalisation of the economy, especially as a contribution to business resilience, clean growth and innovation. And that's actually really neatly just been covered by Chris and of course Stuart in his previous presentation. What are briefly the drivers for change? There's a BBC article there on the left from the 30th of December, talking about the fact that the UK internet usage doubled in 2020 due to the pandemic. So Openreach customers consumed 50,000 petabytes of data in 2020 compared to 22,000 in 2019. And if you didn't know, because I didn't, 1 petabyte is 1,000 terabytes, which equates to 8 million gigabytes. So huge amounts of data, and that demand is only set to increase. Properties connected to the Openreach infrastructure used on average 9 gigabits of data per day. And Boxing Day last year set a new record for consumption. Just starting on the right-hand side of this slide, looking at other drivers, the CIPD said in July last year that home working is set to more than double compared to pre-pandemic levels once the crisis is over. And in the bottom right, the graph illustrates the shift in patterns on online, or in fact, retail behaviour. So the grey line on the top represents the change in online retail and shopping between February and August last year. You can see that on this right-hand side, that online shopping increased by 50% up to 150% of previous levels, corresponding to a dip in physical shopping, represented by the blue and the orange lines. And on the left-hand side of the slide, that illustrates quite neatly how we get from the very basic ADSL internet coverage, which still persists today in large parts of the country, which is all copper wires and allows around about 10 or 11 megabits per second. Super fast, which is a combination of copper and fibre, fibre to the cabinet and copper to the home. And Chris's slide about how far you are away from the exchange is really pertinent here. And then moving on the right-hand side there, full fibre, which is all fibre cables and allows gigabit connectivity. And that is really where we need to be in order to enable the kinds of things that Stuart and Chris have been talking about. This slide illustrates the difference between what is available in theory in terms of broadband coverage in the enterprise M3 area. So on the left-hand side, that's the theoretical availability. Blue is better, red is worse. And on the right-hand side is actually the average download speeds. So clearly there's a marked difference between what you can in theory get, but what you can actually get, the lived experience. And many of you will have first-hand accounts of when you can't get online or when things just completely shut down at certain points in the day. So what we're doing about it, the Enterprise M3 LEP board has agreed for us to pursue the Fibre Spine project that will address these fundamental objectives. One is about enabling access to fibre and gigabit capable services, effectively on an open and wholesale basis, which is the final bullet. So what we're trying to do is allow businesses to have access to higher speeds and greater infrastructure more quickly. The previous slide effectively just demonstrates the market failure, whereby particularly in the rural areas, the commercial operators simply aren't going there at the moment because it's cheaper still for them to overbuild in urban areas and provide faster and faster services to existing customers rather than necessarily reach those hard to reach customers. We want to encourage commercial operators to build that infrastructure deeper into the area to improve resilience. We want to connect public service buildings, including hospitals, to support upgrading of infrastructure and the digitisation of public services, amongst other things. This is the proposed route. You probably can't see it very well, so apologise for that. But again, I'm very welcome to take questions about it later on. But effectively, it stretches from Basingstoke over across to the 5G Innovation Centre at Guildford, and it snakes through 6 different local authority areas, including Waverley, Rushmore, Hart, Basingstoke, Surrey Heath, and Guildford, of course. Just a bit of a closer focus in to see the kind of thing that we're looking at. The purple areas represent high concentrations of housing that we know aren't currently particularly well served by gigabit services. The red areas are business parks or high concentrations of businesses, and this is just looking at the Hart and the Rushmore areas in particular. The red bit, if you can make it out, is where the existing route is planned to go, and the yellow lines are potential extensions that could be included in further phases. just some highlights here, what the route does and where it goes. We've worked in partnership with Ordnance Survey to design the route using their mapping data and the various algorithms which help us to identify a route which is as soft diggable as possible. That means staying away from pavements and roads, and as far as possible is entirely on publicly owned land. The route itself goes past 7 key hospitals, a number of data centres, some key regional development sites, which we've identified in partnership with local authorities, 33 business parks, a couple of FE colleges, 7 train stations, and so on. And the breakdown there on the right-hand side is the percentage of the route in various different local authority areas. Importantly, the route is more or less 50% in Hampshire and Surrey, which for a LEP that straddles both counties is particularly important for us. And that is a very quick skate through the concept there. As I say, very, very looking forward to taking questions when we get into the Q&A.
Rob, that's super of you. Thank you very much indeed. Very interesting as well. So we've had 3 presentations so far that have really been quite local in thought. I was keen to get a slightly broader perspective, so I'm really thrilled to introduce a colleague of mine from my old company, Warwick Hill. He runs the services business for the telco and media business across Europe, and I think he's going to just provide a bit more of a broader context for us all to think about when we're thinking local. Warwick, you're very welcome. Thanks so much for joining, and over to you.
Rob, just checking. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, no problem.
Great, and hopefully you can see everything okay. So thank you very much, and thank you very much to all of you for inviting me to share some thoughts around what I've called this whole digital transformation that we've heard about from the previous 3 speakers. There is no doubt that this technology is here today, but is this an evolution, or is this a reinvention as we go forward? I actually lead our IBM's telco and media services practice for Europe. I've worked on a number of large client engagements around the world, looking at things like banking for the unbanked, looking at the impact and implementing AI solutions for our clients. So I just thought I'd share some observations around this in the next 10-15 minutes. I wanted to just start with a view about what's sort of happening, and I think this does align very much with Stuart's perspective that he gave earlier on here. We talk about this as being outside in transformation or inside out. And by outside in, I really mean this massive shift in customer expectations. This has only been accelerated by the pandemic, as a lot of the other speakers have alluded to. But it is just, it's not simply an age-related thing. I think, genuinely speaking, the expectations in terms of the stability of the service, what one is able to do on one's mobile device, has changed, and therefore the businesses that we deal with have to be able to meet that in today's environment. A great example is one of my clients in Spain, who they had to completely redevelop their online channel to enable all their transactions with their customers to be through WhatsApp, just purely because that messaging application in Spain particularly is 90% of the transactions their customers expect it. So they had to meet that requirement. This is aligned, and if you then look at what's happening from an inside out perspective, you're getting transformation of all the core business processes within an organization, really driven by technology shift. And we've already talked about some of the things like AI and automation and so on earlier. So my prognosis is this, that ultimately every company is going to become a tech company. Doesn't really matter. We'll talk about some examples of that in a minute. That every company will become a platform company. And this is quite a subtle view here. By platform, I mean, think of a platform as a centralized focus of transactions for defining where buyers and sellers can find each other. So in the travel industry, Expedia or Kayak are examples of platforms of exchange in the travel industry. Likewise, of course, Amazon, Netflix are all digital versions of platform companies. And what they allow is in terms of they allow the businesses to scale by bringing on new customers or new employees at very little marginal cost. And that is a massive outcome from effectively this whole digital engagement. So what does one of these, we call them cognitive enterprises, a learning organization, what does it look like? And what are the main elements? And this is just a framework that we use internally with our clients to really talk about the key elements that would enable this sort of platform business to be created. And you can see there, the key to this is really not just becoming more agile, not developing those new skills, but is really the processes within the core business that are operating, be it back office or front office processes, which are really made possible through the use of these exponential technologies that we call them. You know, things like artificial intelligence, blockchain, automation, the Internet of Things, and 5G all being critical. There are more, but those are the 5 ones I just wanted to highlight as we go and give you 1 or 2 examples of use of those technologies in our clients today. I think Stuart has really sort of driven the case here for 5G, but particularly a couple of cases here. You know, when I look at field services and how those are changing, when you have an engineer, this may be an engineer rolling out a new broadband network, really these sorts of engineers using AR, VR, augmented reality and virtual reality in prime time today to really assist them get the job right on a first come served basis. So again, it's facilitated by 5G. Now when I first started talking to one of my clients about a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, about the whole 5G explosion, he was absolutely adamant with me, Warwick, this is all about increased bandwidth. It's all about, increased performance. And unless we do this, I think this chart and many others and the use cases that are now relevant in the industry around 5G just shows that there is a hell of a lot more business transformation than it just been about speed or bandwidth. The agriculture example here, I really like. I mean, we may laugh at drones, but again, they're prime time here, using those to detect the health of over wide areas, over the health of the crops or indeed the soil as you move forward into that particular area. So that's really 5G. I just wanted to spend a couple of seconds on this one on the left. If I talk a bit about IoT, which really drives 5G enabling these new use cases, there is an initiative by UK government, the Catapult programme, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. They have a number of these research centres. There's one in Brighton, is probably the nearest one to us in this region. They're partnering with the DCMS really around a number of priority use cases to enable 5G. And I'd encourage everyone on this call to take a look at the different projects. We are involved in one of these projects, which is around automation of the manufacturing base for development of the new Tempest fighter. You can see there at the top left. But really looking at how we can enable the factory floor to be more efficient, deploying private 5G for these sorts of use cases, also using augmented reality and virtual reality as well, with a target that will be able to reduce the overall manufacturing cost by 50% for one of these amazing jet fighters that you can see there. So I think it's just an example, but it shows you how dramatic it can be. A bit more on the right there, a bit more of an example that's probably closer to home from one of my clients. Really the Vodafone, who have been able to launch their customer service through their Toby chatbot using AI. And they are now through 1 million transactions and 70% of their contacts of their self-service questions are resolved on a first-time basis using this AI chatbot to actually support that. So my children, I mean, I think if I asked them to phone a contact center, they would be pretty gobsmacked today, really. Just the level of expectation around some of these tools that we can now use on a regular basis. So that's the IoT and AI. A couple more examples here with in the automation space. We haven't really talked much about automation, but I do think when we look at processes, particularly the internal processes within a business, how radical we can be. And the Borden-Mona case here on the left, which is an Irish renewables utility, they have completely reinvented their business. So much so that they've actually stopped the farming of peat, which was one of their core businesses, to replace that really with the innovation around renewables. And you can see how they've used automation and robotic process automation to automate their order processing capability and also their customer payments, achieving 90% that are now without manual intervention for those purchase orders being processed. The one on the right is probably more of an example of extreme automation, how when you take that further forward and you really join up the ecosystem using blockchain technology, how we are able, therefore, with this is actually as an example as with Maersk, who looked at a blockchain to really connect all the ports, the shippers, the ships, to really be able to track fleets of deliveries around the world. And you can see there the impact that that had for them in terms of increasing revenues. So that sort of gives you, I think, a context for this technology and the sort of use cases it can shift. But this transformation won't happen without, and here's the worrying bit, right? It won't happen without the shift or the relevant shift in the users, the consumers of that technology, and the employees and the impact it has on them. And I think literally the timing, if you look in the bottom left box here, around this skills gap that is being caused by the digitization across all these different technologies, that the time it takes to train new employees has increased by 10 times in the last 4 years, from about 3.6 days to 36 days. So it shows you now the investment in terms of keeping our employees and our educating our people in how best to exploit this new technologies is becoming the key battleground for a lot of the boardrooms that we talk to. Yeah, and I think this is a key message really that I'd want to leave you with. Gartner had quite an interesting perception on this. About 4 years ago, they said that about, due to automation and robotics, that the number of jobs will be decreased about 30%. They're now saying that AI is going to increase the number of jobs in the market. So it shows you how quickly these things can shift as they go forward. So I just wanted to leave you with one more little story here that I think brings to life this human technology interaction that I just wanted to leave you with. This chap is a chap called Doug Dietz, who's he was one of the founding designers on the MRI scanner, one of these things at GE. And this was a revolutionary technology that was invented at the time. And I'm sure quite a lot of people on the call would have experienced one of these. Certainly I have. And he, when they launched it, he was asked whether by one of the hospitals that was implementing this thing whether he would like to go and visit. And he took them up and he said, right, I'm coming down. So off he went to visit the hospital. He got into the ward and there was a mother with child. And the child was literally, petrified, shaking. She was there with the technical consultants. And he rang upstairs to ask for an anaesthetist. And Doug found out that actually within the pediatrics wards, 80% of the kids had to have anesthetics to make them be calm when pushed into this very noisy environment of which they were told to remain still. It was noisy, it was scary. And so he decided that he'd have to do something about this. He went back to his office and he went over to Stanford to one of their design clinics for a week. And he sat with their designers and he learned all about design thinking, which is we are very big proponents of, as a means to adopt the technology and really shift that transformation. And they looked at stickers, he looked at stories, he looked at how he could attract this environment, how he could have changed this environment for the kids. And this is him at work, trying to sort of think through one of these design thinking sessions about how he could enable that future technology and what it might look like. And he did a number of things and he wrote these stories and he created this adventure series about what this scanner would become in the future. The top left is all about pirates. And the kids were basically told, you're on a pirate ship, you've got to remain very, very still, otherwise the baddies are going to come in and get you. And it was revolutionary. He was able to change the whole scope, the adoption around these things. And you'll see these in a lot of our hospitals now. So I think it's just a great example of technology and adoption. And I think we've got a great opportunity now using 5G, IoT, a number of the other technologies I've talked about, to really reinvent what we do with our customers and our employees as we go forward. So thank you for listening me to take you through that. And I look forward to any questions. Back to you, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Warwick. And that was really interesting. So look, can I ask all of our speakers, Stuart, Chris, Rob, and Warwick, to come on to the start again with your videos, etc., and we'll take some questions. One that's come out immediately, I don't know whether Stuart and Warwick, you want to lead on this, but it's all to do with the technology is there, but how do you get organizations, and I suppose Philip Green was a very good example that was put up by Rob, but to actually adopt and change the culture internally?
I mean, I'll happily start on this. Culture is always a challenge, and I think it has been for a while. I mean, I like the saying about culture is a bit like the wind. It's invisible, but its effect can be seen and heard. And I think with culture change, you need to look at the benefits. And I think you need to have a clear strategy on what you want your business to achieve. And you need to look at, is the adoption of new technologies and practices going to help you achieve that goal? So I think one of the things that you need to look at is, if you are adopting new technologies, how are they going to be able to increase efficiency for you? So for example, if you've got a large office space at the moment, and you've got a number of staff that don't want to be office based, or a bit of not worked in an office for the last year, you've obviously got tools and things that have been allowed you to operate already. So one thing I've noticed, the adoption of MS Teams, that's been a really great way that a number of organizations have kept collaboration going, kept daily meetings or calls quickly, which means that people can still be contactable, they can still be accountable. So, you can see if people are still working, you can see if people are still operating. And I think that helps build a level of trust. But I think it's having these clear directions on what you want to do and what you want to achieve, and then looking at how technologies can help achieve that objective. And I think it's also looking at, how you want to attract people in the future. I think there's wars of talent. People are trying to attract the best of employees out there. And one of the big studies that I look at is McCrindle in Australia, who look at generation X, Y, Z, Alpha, and they're going to have significant expectations coming into the workforce. And if you want to attract these best of breed people, they will come with the expectations that they will be working from home, or they will have flexible working. And I think this was coming in before the pandemic. And I think that's going to influence people's culture and ideologies of what they want to achieve as a business. Because if you have very strict cultures that aren't going to allow people to work from home, or they're not going to be allowed to adopt new technologies, then I think you will have a problem in the future trying to attract good talent.
Good point. Thank you, Stuart. Warwick, do you want to comment on
Yeah, just I guess I'll add a slightly different perspective. I think to me, this focus on the experience is key on this. I talked a bit about that in my presentation at the end there, but I think there's a blunt way, which is you close your call centers and you say you can't get through to us, and you put a big label on your screen, which still amuses me, that says we've been in this pandemic a year, and it still says we've got issues, right? Or you demonstrate that experience is actually better if you go through an online or a mobile or whatever, or a messaging or whatever you're trying to do in terms of interacting with that customer. If customers feel it's a better experience, they're going to want to use it more in the future, and therefore you effectively can sell them on that benefit. So there's a blunt way and there's a softer way, I think, Robert.
Yeah, good point. Rob, Chris, any comments or any thoughts on that question you want to add?
Yes, if I may, that point just made there was about reminding me of the slide I had up for Primark, because I think one of the issues which might be coming through there is actually consumer habits of returns. And that is something which is a real problem, because if people are buying online, it's known that some people are actually trying things on or putting things on, wearing them once and then returning them. And I think it'd be interesting to know what was actually behind Primark's reasoning, but I know that is an issue for a lot of traditional retailers. And so again, it's a cultural thing, and there's a lot, I think, to do in the way of education of the public at large.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Rob, or will you move on to the next question?
Yeah, I mean, it's been some excellent points made. The only thing I would kind of add, I guess, a slightly different perspective is that, you know, the pandemic has accelerated a lot of trends in one respect or another. And I suspect there's a significant proportion of businesses nationally who have been in survival mode for the last kind of 10, 11 months, who are now thinking about, how do I recover and grow, you know, once the vaccination program is rolled out and when we return to some kind of version of normality. And that will inevitably include adaptation to new ways of doing things, because actually currently businesses with overheads in terms of people like Primark have got overheads in terms of staff and physical premises. They may be at a disadvantage to those who have gone online faster and more readily. So it's interesting that, you know, and it can apply across the whole range of sectors, not just those that seem to be more readily identifiable as digital. So something that the LEP will be looking at over the next 12 months.
Can I just add, I do think there's a certain level of disruption that you see with these industries. I know ASOS, for example, is probably one of the reasons why people are buying tons of clothes, trying them on and then sending them back. So that's where I do think we have this on-demand generation that will, you know, that will become the expectation. I can order 6 pairs of jeans and I'll try them on at home and then I'll send 5 back. And I'll do that again next week. It's not my problem that the retailers don't like that. They're going to have to adapt to my views and how I operate. And I do think that's something that we will see this, will happen in a number of things, a bit like Netflix, Disney Plus. If I want to watch something, I want to watch it now. I don't want to watch a TV advert. I want to be able to go on, watch it when I want, and then come off. That's my expectation. I've had that for the last year. I want it now for the future.
Very good point. So another sort of question coming up is if we accept the fact that home working is going to become more important, we can argue about how much it will be post-pandemic. What about connectivity in areas where you're not necessarily in high density housing areas? Because a lot of the sort of this area around Surrey and indeed Hampshire as well is quite rural. Connectivity in rural areas. How does the panel think that's going to evolve over the next couple of years?
Well, I think it has to evolve. I mean, I think one of the things that we'll see is the value of homes and areas will go up depending on the level of connectivity they've got. For example, if you lived in an area now that has no connectivity, I wouldn't be able to do this video call. I wouldn't be able to essentially do my job, which means I have to either relocate or go somewhere else. So I think one of the things that excites me, especially when I see things like the fiber spine, is that that pushes the value of buildings, of areas to live up in those regions, because you've got levels of connectivity. I did a lot of work in Guildford, and there was a number of projects there where the digital games companies were working on big projects that they had to send huge files to the west coast of America. If they haven't got connectivity, they can't do it. They can't do their job. So they're either going back into the office at 2, 3, 4 in the morning to be able to send files, or they can't, they literally cannot work. So I think, whilst rural is a problem for most countries, I don't think anyone's really mastered rural connectivity yet. It's something that I think we'll see significant investment coming from a government perspective, but it'll also have, I think there'll be a lot of internal pressures from local communities for the LEPs, for their local councils to make these investments.
Chris, you're nodding.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing Stuart said there was about councils and investment. Now we're doing it on a really small scale. And of course, from a council point of view, one of the challenges over the last year has been the reduced income through things like car parking, which of course was a major element of the council's budgeting. So I think one of the challenges, I was heartened actually to hear, I think it was you, Stuart, earlier on, we were talking about VC investment. That's, I think, where we've got to head, because councils, especially with other things which are distracting us at the moment in Surrey, for instance, unitary authorities, what sort of local government, relations with the government, and indeed the thing I didn't dwell on one of the slides, but about the future of business rates. You know, these are all issues for councils. So I think the opportunity, we've got to be there to encourage and enable full digital connectivity, but it's going to be through those other partners like VCs and others.
From your point of view, Warwick, what do you see around Europe with your big clients about?
Well, on the rural piece, yeah, on the rural piece, it's not just the UK, obviously. So there are some countries. We're doing quite a lot of work actually in Poland at the moment, and there's a 5G operator in the government is actually stepping in and is being very, very proactive about how you can implement mobile 5G edge technologies in collaboration with all the mobile operators. So I think there is, you know, Stuart made the point. I think government and the regulator will step in, either that or we'll see a shift in things like satellite technology that means that it will, you know, it's already there. A lot of the satellite operators are investing in this. So I think my main thought on that is really that, yeah, I think it will just happen, and we won't be talking about it so much in a few years. Or I'd like to think that anyway, Robert.
Fingers crossed.
Rob, your point of view on this subject?
Yes, I mean, again, some excellent points made. I think that Chris mentioned in his presentation about broadband for Surrey Hills. I mean, organisations like that exist because there is market failure. There would not be a need for small community-based providers to create themselves if the market was serving those areas. And it's purely economics. It's down to the volume of customers in a particular area, and that problem is not going to go away. And as I touched upon in my presentation, it's much more attractive for providers to overbuild in areas that they're already in to provide higher levels and faster levels of service than it is for them to go into the rural areas. Realistically, you know, as Warwick's just said, I think the solution lies in a combination of things. Satellite is definitely one of those, and that sector is evolving very quickly to provide different solutions for domestic markets. But also things like 5G, and the solution won't necessarily be in fibre to the premise in all areas. And one of the things that we're designing the fibre spine route in mind is to have 5G breakout stations, so that actually if the spine runs past you know, within a few kilometres of a small community, rather than a provider having to come in and then deploy expensive infrastructure to deliver fibre to the premise, 5G becomes an alternative option. You can get, you know, gigabit speeds over 5G quite comfortably. So it's going to be a mixture of solutions that gets full coverage in terms of gigabit for the UK.
Right, final question before we pack up. I had a very good question from Nick Wemans asking, what trends does the panel see in recreational activities, given as the division of work and home becomes increasingly blurred as a result of digital capabilities? I don't know, sort of have 30 seconds from each member if that's possible. So what trends do the panel see in recreational activities, given as the division of work and home becomes increasingly blurred as a result of digital capabilities? Warwick, you're smiling.
No, I was just trying to think of my recreational activities, Rob.
Yeah, exactly. You're an IBM. So
they all seem to be shut down at the moment. So I was having a bit of a problem switching my gearing my head. I mean, it's just more of a personal thing, but clearly two of my hobbies are and I wish I could do more of both, but and I do both very badly, are one of them being golf and the other one sailing. And of course, this tech innovation has made a big difference in both those sports, if you really think about it. How I can combine those more effectively with my work life, I have no idea, you know, unfortunately. But certainly, I have one inspirational thing here. I would love it if we could just get a remote sensor in a golf ball so that you never actually could lose your golf ball. And I for the life of me, I don't know why that's not happened yet. So I leave you with that thought.
Hopefully someone on the call will listen. Stuart, I'll give you the final word before we close.
I think I mentioned it in my talk, but looking at things like esports and YouTube streamers and people seeing, new opportunities, people maybe out of work or people younger generation who are watching people play competitive gaming and creating careers out of it. I was always told when I was younger that I'm never going to get a job playing computer games. Well, now I look at it and think, well, people are having significant careers playing computer games. So I think that, the ability to stream, the ability to, for other people to watch you, to build engagement, to create, I think Warwick said about an experience. If you can create an experience that people can look at, you can commercialize that. And I think that's going to only be benefited from technologies like 5G and people getting access to increased connectivity.
Super. Well, look, thank you all. That's to Warwick, to Rob, to Stuart and Chris very much for your presentations and your thoughts to the rest of the attendees for the seminar. I really appreciate it. Really had an interesting hour. For those of you interested, the next Business South event is going to be in early March. We're talking about the next generation workers and leaders, which hopefully you'll be interested in attending when we do it. But for the rest of you, have a lovely evening tonight. Thanks again to everyone, and we'll see you soon. Thank you and good night.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.